1. Aura. I am Aura. The words rang through the courtyard, initially anyhow, but by the end of that statement, sound had gone muted and strange. Once the last syllable of the final word had been declared, I realized that the sound of my own voice was the only sound left to hear, and that the people all around me were frozen. Déjà vu. Back when I was 10 years old and my brother was 6, the Arcane Tetrad threw a massive New Year's Eve gala. Now I saw it was all for publicity's sake. None of the reigning masters had any desire to celebrate, least of all the Water Master, who spent most of his time traveling whenever his duties to the Tetrad didn't require his physical presence. But since it was winter, and winter meant ice, the event's decoration fell to fathom. You can't appreciate the meaning of the word ethereal until you've seen an ice sculpture formed by a Water Master. And there wasn't just one sculpture on display either. The entire courtyard was filled. How much arcane energy had he squandered while Corona's water supply went fetid? That wasn't the sort of question I'd asked myself back when I was a kid. After all, I'd only recently learned the city was falling apart. Fathom's statuary was lit from within by captured phosphorescence, and initially it looked like a wonderland of sparkling jewels. Striding into the display turned out to be less fun than I expected, though. The glint and glitter should have made the frozen statuary easy to distinguish from living, breathing partygoers, but it hadn't. Walking through the groupings of figures caused a niggling tinge of fear to tug at my awareness, the uncanny feeling of being watched. But whenever I turned to see if someone really was looking at me, I found nothing but the blank, crystalline stare of a soulless statue. At first, I thought the figures were disturbing because they were subtly wrong. But maybe the opposite was true. Maybe because they'd been created directly from a thought. They were too lifelike. So perfect they were no longer beautiful, but eerie. That night, I woke up in a cold sweat, convinced that those ice people were all around me, as if they'd somehow multiplied during the night and slipped into my room on frozen feet. That they were staring down at me with their clear, unseeing eyes. The mental image was so vivid, it haunts me to this day. The publicity event came and went, but Fathom's freakish group of frozen revelers stuck around nearly 3 more months. I'd asked my father to melt them, but, of course, he didn't listen. And when I tried to speed the process along with buckets of warm water, the sculptures only got creepier, distorted and malformed. Fast forward 15 years. How strange was it that when I stood upon the dais in that same courtyard and took the Arcanum, or more accurately, allowed the Arcanum to take me, the scene I encountered was not unlike the ice sculpture gala of my nightmares. But as for me, I wasn't a scared little girl anymore. And I wasn't merely Fire's daughter either. The Arcanum didn't just flow through my veins. It permeated every cell of my being. The glowing sigil on my chest and the letters culled from my birth name were just the beginning. The transfiguration was a deep and all-encompassing shift. I was still myself, but so much more. Aura. Arcane Master. Not of any physical element, but of spirit. I can imagine how it must have looked to everyone else in that courtyard after the Arcanum rushed into me. Once I was done inhaling and inhaling and inhaling, once I'd announced my arcane name was Aura, I would have seemed to disappear. Just like Grace Thompson. I'd always felt vaguely sorry for Grace, but that's when I thought of her as the first person to be consumed by the Arcanum. Knowing it was possible she hadn't disintegrated, but instead transfigured, should have been a relief. But not if it meant she'd lived out all the remaining years of her life as I was now, a ghost flitting through a frozen world.